The MMO genre might not be my absolute favorite genre of video game, but it is one that interests me greatly, to the point where I'd say it is one of my favorite genres. Why does it interest me so much? Well, I've always been a creative person, and the first thing I look at in an MMO isn't anything related to the gameplay. It's the character creation. How many options are there? What are the playable races and classes? Do I want it to be an accurate representation of myself, or do I want to be something I'm not? I always make sure my selection is perfect before diving into whatever game I'm playing. It is, after all, a representation of myself. Gotta look good. And we all know, fashion is the real endgame of any of these games. But while I could talk your ear off all day about why I like this genre, and I promise it goes much deeper than just being able to express myself in a virtual space and live vicariously through my goblin illusionist and pretend I'm actually successful in a made-up world because I'm actually a failure in real life, especially in this pandemic where video games and family are all I have left in this life, and that's not what I'm here to talk about today. When one thinks of the MMO genre, the first thing that comes to mind is probably World of Warcraft. And who could blame you? It's the most popular and successful game of the genre. Well, that is until Classic happened and killed it off. Who would have thought, huh? A legendary WoW killer was WoW itself, and now both versions of the game are shells of their former selves in terms of player base. Actually, I think the most popular and successful MMO right now is probably Final Fantasy XIV, but I digress. But have you ever even wondered how deep this rabbit hole goes? What was the first MMO, and what eventually led to the giant known as World of Warcraft? Now, you probably haven't because you're most likely normal, but I have. I've been doing a thing where I like to call Game a Week. It's a hobby where I play a different game every week and review it for my friends. After I tackled classics like EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and Dark Age of Camelot, I decided to go all the way down, did my research, played every pre-WoW game that caught my interest. I was going to call it the Retro Arc or the History Arc, but that ran into a little snag. As it turns out, most of these games are, as you can imagine, no longer available to play, but I thought due to the significance these games have had on the genre's history, they deserve more than just a little write-up before the actual review, like what I did with Pyria Chronicles and Wildstar previously on Game a Week. And so, I decided to go all out and make a video about it instead. There will be a couple reviews here and there of the games that I actually did get to play, but for the most part, this is going to be more of an informative video than anything else. For lack of a better term, this is a very special episode of Game Week. Now, this isn't every MMO that predated World of Warcraft, just ones that I haven't played before, so I won't be covering EverQuest, EverQuest 2, Dark Age of Camelot, or Tibia Online, since I already covered them on Game a Week. Put a link in the description for the 3 of you who actually would care to read those reviews, and B, I'll only be covering the games that actually interested me, so I skipped a few that didn't interest me, such as Habitat and Adventure. Because honestly, we'd be here forever if I did all of them. And I'm only one dude. So, with all that out of the way, let's start at the very beginning. It is, after all, a very good place to start. At NASA, in 1973, Steve Coley, Greg Thompson, and Howard Palmer created the first MMO, Maze War. While it might not be exactly what you think when you think of MMOs, it was, in fact, the first virtual space where multiple people on different machines could interact with each other. By definition, it was the first MMO. The game itself was very simple. You would shoot other players inside of a randomly generated maze. It was a war in a maze war. And that's pretty much all there was to it. It really is that simple. The game was successful, so much so that the game was banned from the ARPANET at one point, which was the internet before the internet was the internet. Because half of all data packets was Mazeware commuting back and forth between Stanford and MIT. Now, I actually did get to play Mazeware. I found a website that emulates it, and I'm happy to be able to show it to you. Alright, so here's Mazeware. Setting it up is really weird, so here's basically what you do. Go boom, then you go boom. Oh wait, oh no, I fucked it up. I ruined everything. Welcome to Macintosh. There we go. Alright, let's boot up Mazeware. We're gonna go with the eyeball. Alright, so we're in. This is Mazeware. You press the spacebar to shoot, and you use the WASD to move. I forget how to move forward, though. Alright, use R to move forward. Alright. And you use D. We're gonna use D to rotate and R to forward. So, what I was originally planning to do for this was I was gonna get a bunch of friends together, and we were gonna do Mazeware together, but I'll get into that later. But basically nowadays all you can do is fight the AI, and there are different AIs for you to choose from. Right now we're on Alter Ego. At least I think that's what we're on. But there's Teleporter. Alter Ego just kind of like sits there, doesn't do anything. There's Teleporter, which teleports you. And then there's Hunter. Oh, I died. Arf. Hunter is basically, he's the real NPC that you can fight. Oh. Did I get him? I did not get him. No respect at all. Yo, turn around. Stupid mistake. Squadala. Alright, we got him that time. And then finally there's Shadow Master, which is basically just the hunter, except he's invisible. You can still see him on the map though. got him. Yeah, and that's Maze War. You can really only play it for like 5 minutes before getting bored. But I mean, you know, it's nice for what it is. I imagine this game would be a lot better to play, you know, with actual people. So we can't play the real Maze War. So, alright, so it tells you how to play with other people. And so originally my plan for this is that I was going to get a bunch of friends together and do multiplayer. We were going to do Maze War together for this. But, okay. So here's these are the directions for doing multiplayer. So let's try to set this up and see what happens. I'm gonna select chooser. Alright, and then it says click the Apple active button next to Apple Talk. Alright, there it is. Make sure you are connected to an Apple Talk network. We're going to press continue. And cannot join the network server error. And the whole thing freezes. You have to reboot the site, well, refresh the site in order to play again. And you gotta put in the boot disk again. You know, wait for it to boot up. Put in your name. And then put in the floppy disk that contains Maze Wars. I don't know how old this website is. It's kind of a funny way to do it. You're basically emulating the entire Macintosh computer instead of just the game. But I don't know how old this website is, but whatever servers they have, we have scheduled tournaments here, nothing there. Whatever servers they have are long gone. So, playing Maze War multiplayer the way it's meant to be played is no longer possible, unfortunately. Even though I did get to play it, I don't think it's fair to give it a score since I was only able to play against the AI. So you could say I didn't get the real Maze War experience. I give Maze War a 1 out of 10. Not because I think it's bad. Like I said, while it couldn't hold my attention for more than half an hour, I feel like it would be a lot more fun to play with other people. So 1 out of 10, not because it's bad, but because it was first. It was number 1. Next on the list is Zork. No, not that Zork. Or that one. Yeah, that Zork. Zork was a text-based adventure game that, while technically not an MMO, could only be played over the ARPANET in 1977. I didn't actually get to play I did actually get to play Zork, but like any other text-based game I played, I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do and rage quit moments later. I unfortunately never had the pleasure of being eaten by a group. But Zork was very successful and was split into 3 parts for its commercial release. Zork 1, The Great Underground Empire, Zork 2, The Wizard of Frogos, and Zork 3, The Dungeon Master. Actually, is that the D&D chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh? You know, the final boss of that chapter is Dark Master Zork. I wonder if that was actually based on this. Huh. Well, interestingly enough, you didn't need to type in the exact phrase in order to do a thing in Zork. For example, instead of read letter, you could write read the letter. Or anything in that ballpark like a normal person, and it would still understand you. Which is something a lot of text-based adventures could have learned from. Then came the year 1980, bringing us to our next game, Island of Kesmai. Island of Kesmai was an online multi-user dungeon, or MUD for short, that could only be played through the internet service provider CompuServe. Yeah, we finally made it to the internet. No more ARPANET. CompuServe was actually the first major internet service provider. They would eventually become AOL, which is a name I haven't heard in a long time, but I think we're all familiar with. The game, as you can see, didn't look like much, and it wasn't much. But it was successful enough that people were actually willing to pay CompuServe $6 an hour to play. $12 for a faster connection. And I thought $15 a month was pushing it. It really makes me glad I was born in 1996, just at the right time. The game was inspired by Dungeons & Dragons, and unlike Zork, featured a proper RPG combat system. Island of Kesmai basically became the prototype for what would be the first ever MMORPG. You can technically play Island of Kesmai today, but there's a problem, and it's the reason I didn't get to play it. There are 2 private servers that exist for the game right now. But you can't just make an account and download the game like you'd expect. In both cases, you have to fill in an application and wait for a moderator to approve you and set you up to play in order to get into the game. And since absolutely no one moderates those forums anymore, that's just not happening. While Maze War was the first MMO, Neverwinter Nights in 1991, not to be confused with the 2002 BioWare game of the same name, was the first MMORPG. Remember how I said Island of Kesmai would later become the prototype to the first MMORPG? Well, this is the exact point where we upgraded from MUDs to MMORPGs. It was run by AOL, and yes, there was an hourly subscription fee required to play this game as well. Again, I honestly can't imagine paying for that. The game could support 50 people per server, which was a big upgrade from Island of Kesmai's 6 people per server. As the game continued, the number of players per server was upgraded 100-fold to 500 per server. Despite the game's success, it was eventually shut down in 1997. Every good thing must come to an end, but I feel like 6 years is a little short. Don't you think? Unfortunately, there's no answer for why its life was so short. At least, none that I could dig up. I guess whatever happened, happened. Now, I could tell you what the game was like, or I could show you. I found a playable offline version of this game on a very sketchy looking website, but beggars can't be choosers. Alright, so here we are on our very sketchy emulating site. We're gonna start the game. Press enter. And our adventure begins. There is no sound, so at least there's no sound coming out of this emulator. Alright, we're in. Gonna go with a half health. Man. And, let's be cleric, fighter, magic user. You know, It suits me pretty well. Be lawful good. Being a good boy is always good. Right. Begin adventuring. Alright, let's go. I am Lord Nasher. Welcome to Neverwinter, my friend. Neat. You overhear a passerby make a comment about dashing adventures. I am Lord Nasher. Welcome to... Oh, whoops. Welcome to Neverwinter, my friend. Alright. Let's go. Let's go do a thing. A guard stops you and says, "Be careful. If you cross this bridge, it's more dangerous on the other side." Psh, nothing I can't handle. A sign above the door says, "Linwood Taylor Weaponry and Armor Plate Mail Alterations, a specialty." A sign above the gate says, "To the Neverwinter Wharves." The village well lies in the center of the square. Once a favorite local gathering place, the now dry well appears deserted. You stop a passerby and ask why it's been abandoned. "It's a place of ill luck," he says. "When the well went dry, it was the beginning of all our troubles, and no one wishes more troubles for themselves. You'd best stay away too." The town well has apparently dried up. You see notches cut into the wall, like a ladder leading down. Do you wish to descend? Yeah, let's go. Alright, we ended up in hell. You know, that's... Oh, it's a fight. We're fighting. Oh, good. I forgot how to... Let's go! Attack! Yep, oh. What happened? Oh, we're dead. We're dead. We died. So yeah, that's Neverwinter Nights. That was the first MMO RPG. So yeah, that's what that game was like. Like Maze War, since I was unable to play with other players and therefore did not get the real experience, I feel like it's not fair to give it a proper score. I give Neverwinter Nights a Smitty Werbenman Jangerman Jensen out of 10. It was number 1, but also number 4. But that's not to say the age of MUDs was over, or the age of text-based games for that matter either. Legends of Future Past, yes, that's its actual name, released in 1992, was both. And as you can see from the promotional flyer I've got on screen right now, it was apparently the best game ever made. At least, that's what it makes it sound like. I wouldn't actually know, since the game isn't available to play in any form, not even in a sketchy Flash-based website form. I guess it wasn't that good after all. Not good enough for anyone to care enough to preserve it anyway. I'm also guessing you had to call that number in order to set up your account. Again, I wouldn't know, there's barely any information about this game that exists today on the internet, that flyer and the Wikipedia page is literally all we have to go on. But what I do know is that this game also costs $6 per hour to play. I also know it was the first game to have a crafting system. So I guess I owe it to you, Legends of Future Past, for my childhood addiction of cooking lobsters on Karamja Island. And taken straight from the Wikipedia page is the only other information on this game that exists. Legends of Future Past was set in the Shattered Realms, a world featuring a blend of fantasy and ancient technology, which, I guess the name actually makes sense. Most of the action in the game revolved around the city of Fade, which served as the hub of activity for adventures, intrigue, and role-playing events. Some of the races include Elfin, an elf-like species, Draken, a race of dragon men that ultimately resulted in player-created languages and cultural institutions. Okay, that sounds awesome. I want to know more about that. Why is there no information about this game anywhere? Ephemerals are wraith-like species that could not be harmed unless the player chose to manifest themselves. And that also sounds awesome. I want to know more about this too. That sounds like the coolest game mechanic ever. Highlander, think dwarves. That's not my commentary, it actually says that. Humans, the only people who could utilize ancient technology. Murg, a proud warrior race. Mechanoids, artificial beings, and wolflings, a race of shape changers. Going back to 1991 real quick, there was a game that emerged alongside Neverwinter Nights as direct competition. That game was, and there's no way I'm going to pronounce this correctly, the Shadow of Yserbius. Not a true MMORPG, it was but another MUD. The goal of the game was to kill an evil elemental creature called Enli Keel. There were a number of rooms where up to 30 people could meet and adventure together in groups, of up to 4. Combat was turn-based. The available classes were Barbarian, Knight, Ranger, Thief, Cleric, and Wizard. And the playable races were Human, Orc, Elf, Troll, Dwarf, Gnome, Halfling, and Gremlin. The game allowed PvP, which I believe, aside from Maze War, the Shadow of Yserbius was the first game to feature it. Unfortunately, this is also where hacking to gain an unfair advantage saw its origin. I guess it's only fitting that in the same game that gave birth to PvP, also gave birth to cheating in online games. There was also a tavern, which was the social hub for this game, meaning that this was the first game you could just log in and hang out with other players. I guess it's also fitting that this was also the game that first showed signs of an MMO also being a social network. While fashion wasn't the end game, because I don't think there was fashion, this was the game that planted that seed. And I will bet anything that the tavern was the prototype to the Goldshire Inn, if you know what I mean. The Shadow of Yserbius was not able to be played under any official means, as the game was shut down after it was acquired by AOL from AT&T. Yeah, the phone company AT&T. AOL then shortly shut it down as it was direct competition with Neverwinter Nights. And on the same website that I found Neverwinter Nights playable, I did find a playable version of the Shadow of Yserbius, but I wasn't impressed. I played it for like 5 minutes and got bored. I feel like Maze War and Neverwinter Nights, being the first MMO and MMORPG respectively, necessary to go out of my way to emulate in order to play to show to you, but I didn't feel it was necessary with the Shadow of Yserbius. It's not a necessity. So moving on. Next on our list is Nexus, Kingdom of the Winds, in good old 1996. This was the first Korean MMO. You know how, like, 90% of all MMOs are Korean for some reason? Well, this is the one that started it all. This was also the first one on my list that is actually still running, and you'll see my experience with the game playing in the background right now. And as you can see on the title screen, the copyright belongs to the Nexon Corporation. See, this is why we can't defeat Nexon. They've been around since the dawn of time. They're more powerful than we can possibly imagine. Heck, I didn't even know they had roots this deep in the rabbit hole until I played this game. They are truly the most ancient of all enemies in the MMO industry, and just like Cthulhu, they won't die. They can't die. They're untouchable, invincible, immortal, and that terrifies me. Anyway, on to the actual game. The game sounds really cool on paper. There's an alignment / karma system that goes up or down depending on your actions, and every character has a quote-unquote legend that keeps track of all your major accomplishments, whether they're good or bad. It'll even tell you how many times you've been moderated. Combat is very clunky. You click on an enemy to attack, but if they move from that spot before you get there, your character just forgets about it, and you have to click again. Also, there's no auto attack, so you have to keep clicking on an enemy until it dies. It's honestly very frustrating. At character creation, you pick a totem, which I thought was like picking a class, as that's what the description of each totem had me to believe. But that ended up not being the case. The totem I chose was Bayako, the White Tiger, but the class I ended up picking was Warrior, the Path of the Blue Dragon. So I don't really know what the totem is supposed to do. I also never finished the tutorial, and this is where things get really bad. I ran into an enemy called a Scout Seabong. No matter what I did, I couldn't land a hit on this thing. I couldn't run away. If I walked too far away from it, it would just teleport me back to it. There was literally nothing I could do about this. The game was unplayable. I don't mean like unplayable like the meme. I mean it was actually literally unplayable. I could not play the game. So I went on the game's subreddit to ask what the hell was I supposed to do about this, and I got 5 responses. The first and most upvoted response was, and I quote, "That's actually hilarious." Thanks, man. That was very helpful. The next response was, "The devs assumed no one would be stupid enough to start the game new." Alright then. Third response was, "You're better off just booting up Steam and looking for another game to play." Oh boy. Yeah, this is a real good signs here. And finally, I got 2 responses telling me that the only way out of this was to type /report, which is a command used for reporting bugs, but they assured me that GM would make an exception and come bail me out. So, plan A was to ask for help, and if no one showed up, plan B was to just drop the game. So I typed /report and received this message: "You are too young to do that. Report blocked." In other words, either my account had to be older or I had to be a higher level to use the report function. So after explaining this to Reddit, one guy offered to come kill the Zebong for me. Oh, and if you're saying I should just log out and play again the next day, there's one thing I forgot to mention. I did that. When I came back, the Zebong was just waiting for me. The only way to get it to stop harassing you is to kill it. And I put up with its shit for an entire week. Anyway, I told the guy thanks but no thanks. I appreciated the offer, but if this happened again, I'd be screwed. So I'd rather just save us both the time and just not to play the game that can just randomly lock you out of it. Someone did eventually kill the thing for me, but a week had already passed, and Game Week for Nexus Kingdom of the Winds was at its end. I tried to lure it to other players before, but no one bothered to help me until the week was already over. So that was unfortunately too little, too late. This game sounded cool, but I unfortunately wasn't really able to play it. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, you have to pay to even make an account. There's a free-to-play option, but if you uninstall the game before buying an account, all your progress is lost. And then after you buy an account, you still have to pay a subscription fee. Major yikes. But just as I was ready to put this game behind me forever, I received a PM on Reddit from the guy who offered to kill the Z-Bong for me. Hi there, I can understand how frustrating it is trying to play a game and it is blocking you at every step. To be honest, this is an incredibly unique situation. Anyway, I can understand if you want to stop playing, but the offer stands if you'd like to still give the game a shot. Nexus is actually a pretty special game, despite some flubs like this, where the GM obviously had a huge brain fart and didn't consider how this would affect truly new players, which the game doesn't get a whole lot of because it's so old. And they don't advertise it too much. I'm not sure how much you've read about the game or know its mechanics, but players hold positions of power within the game's community here. I happen to be one of the top 12 players in this regard, which gives me a little bit closer access to the people who run the game. I've sent a letter explaining your situation and asking them to remedy this. Even if you decide not to play, maybe this will save others some frustration. It then went on to say that if I do decide to play the game again, I should whisper him and he'd be more than happy to help me out. Apparently this Z-Bong, this is a pretty new addition to the game. It's based on the current pandemic that's ravaging our world. A Z-Bong can randomly ensnare you like a disease, and the only way to damage it is with an item called a Shaman Charm. It's actually pretty funny because there are NPCs that actually say, I reserve the right to not wear Shaman Charm, like those idiots who refuse to wear masks, turning it into stupid political argument. Wear the goddamn Shaman Charm, you selfish idiot. Speaking of NPCs, I forgot to mention, civilian NPCs can randomly attack you too, and you're, for whatever reason, not allowed to fight back. The game doesn't give you the option to attack them, even if they're attacking you. Why is it like this? Anyway, I was really touched by that PM I received on Reddit. This game is really something special to this guy, and that's very heartwarming. Like he said, this game doesn't get a lot of new players, and he actually wrote a letter to the devs, so I, probably the first new player in ages, wouldn't leave. I give Nexus Kingdom of the Winds a 6 out of 10. Good on paper, frustrating in practice. I cannot and will not recommend this to you as a new player. Heck, it at least speaks for itself when the game's own fanbase tells a new player to just drop the game. But I will actually continue to play this, at least until level 49, which is where the free-to-play version locks you out. I'm not spending a cent on this game, but I owe this guy who reached out to me that much money. I don't owe him anything, but I was really touched by what he did, and so I want to make him happy. I will play this game for as long as I'm able to, which is up to level 49, then I'll drop it. The picture on screen right now is a screenshot I took at the end of the week. As you can see, I only ever got to level 5. That's how much of a problem that Z-Bong was. But 1996 wasn't finished. Being the greatest year in human history, 1996 has brought the world numerous wonderful things. Pokemon, Tamagotchi, Persona, Yu-Gi-Oh!, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Space Jam, Denzel Washington being crowned the sexiest man alive, Great Coon, Diamond is Unbreakable's ending theme, the Macarena, Amish Paradise, Detective Conan, Harvest Moon, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, aka the best Mario Kart game. Me. Did I miss anything? Not nearly as great as any of those things, but still came out in 1996, was The Realm Online, which is probably the closest thing to a MUD that's still available to play today. The Realm Online was a 2D MMORPG that hasn't aged very well. The graphics are Microsoft Paint quality, and there's no tutorial. It just throws you into the world and hopes you know what you're doing. I didn't. There's not even anything to point you in the right direction, you just wander aimlessly until you hit something that looks interesting. The combat is turn-based, which is actually really nice. I really enjoyed the combat in this game. I just wish more MMOs used a turn-based combat system. I guess that's just something I'll have to do myself. The concept of strategy in online games seems to be fading as time goes on. Turn-based RPGs are awesome and do not get enough credit. I want to play things like this with my friends, dang it. Your position even matters in battle, as you have to spend a turn to move closer to your opponent if you're out of range. When you die, you're given two options, try harder and run home. Run home sends you back to the starting area, while try harder lets you just get up and keep going. There doesn't seem to be any penalty for dying, so unless your enemy kills you before you can get a hit in, you can just keep going at it until you wear them down. As long as you can hit them once, you've won the fight. This is how I managed to clear any dungeon I attempted by just brute forcing my way through. Imagine being able to do this in real life. Got shot through the heart? Just try harder. Got in a nasty car accident? Just try harder. Mafia kidnapped you and threw you into the Boston Harbor while your arms and legs are restrained? Just try harder. Dying only happens if you give up. Just get good and live forever, or else you're just a quitter. On my last day of playing, I realized something very major. Mana doesn't recharge in this game, like it does in literally every other game. You have to buy it at magic shops, like ammo. Imagine having to buy HP in order to heal. I can't imagine playing as a mage in this game and casting spells that require more than 1 mana to use. It's like dumping an entire clip of bullets to fire one shot. Ammo has got to be the worst game mechanic ever. There's a reason I played Melee in RuneScape, because it was the only combat option that didn't run out of uses. But it's even worse in this game because I didn't realize what was happening until I was up a creek. Having mana be a physical item when my brain has been trained for it to be a naturally replenishing resource is unforgivable. Good thing I played Adventurers, so the only magic I used was a spell that cost 1 mana, just so I could still attack while out of melee range until my opponent came to me. Even though I like combat in the game, the lack of direction really kills it for me. I don't know where to go or what I'm supposed to be doing. Annihilating all life indiscriminately gets old after a few minutes. I need purpose, something to do, a challenge to overcome. Otherwise, it's just empty. The closest thing I could find to do that were dungeons. But wandering around until I find a dungeon isn't the most thrilling thing to do either. And for some reason, all my melee attacks keep missing, but my magic always hits despite my strength being much higher than my intelligence. I give The Realm Online a 4 out of 10. The combat is great, but there just isn't anything to do with it. I'm sure this game has loads of content, I just couldn't find any of it. I won't be continuing to play this one, and I'll be real with you, while graphics have never been high on my priority list. After all, one of my favorite games of all time is Earthbound, but Boy, I really do not like looking at this game. It might actually be the ugliest game I've ever played. But 1996 just keeps on going as we have another game from that year. In today's lineup, Meridian 59. It actually had a launch in 1995, but it was relaunched for commercial release in 1996. It did early access decades before early access was a thing. One of the men on the dev team was John Hank, who would later found Niantic. Now that's a name we all know. I said that the Realm Online was the closest thing to a MUD. That's still available to play today, but Meridian 59 is also pretty close. I'd say they're tied with each other in that respect. Not that I would know for a fact, because I've actually never played a MUD due to them no longer existing. But from what I can tell from my research, these two are pretty close to MUDs. Meridian 59 is one of many games alongside EverQuest and a couple of other games I'm going to cover later in this video that people think is the first MMO. But as we already know from much earlier in this video, that's super not true. It's not even the first MMORPG. I actually can't tell if this game is 2D or 3D, so I think that makes it 2.5D? I don't know, maybe someone with more knowledge on Ds can tell me that one. But from what I can tell, is that this game has great music. I'll be quiet for a little so you don't have to hear me talk over it. I don't know where the footage is at right now, but hopefully it's playing one of the more exciting tracks right now. The only issue I have with the music is that it doesn't always play the most fitting track at the most fitting area. Like, at one point, there was exciting music fitting for a JRPG Final Bosses theme, but it was playing while I was walking through a peaceful meadow with little to no enemies. It was great music, it just felt really out of place. Unlike the Realm Online, Meridian actually does have a tutorial, but it's not very noticeable. It only teaches you very basic things like how to attack and how to buy and sell things. It doesn't teach you anything in the way of seeking out and accepting quests or talking to NPCs. As you leave the tutorial, you're given your first quest. Go to Core North and choose your hometown. It recommends you ask NPCs about each town so you can make an informed decision, but there's just one problem. You didn't tell me how to talk to NPCs, just how to buy their shit. There's no talk option when you click on NPCs. There's no anything option. In order to buy stuff, you have to walk up to them and type the word buy. So how am I supposed to know what keywords I'm supposed to say out loud in order to get the information I need? This is why I'm no good at text-based adventure games. And little did I know before playing this game, this entire dialogue system is basically a text-based adventure. I'm sure this is more immersive, but who the hell thought this was a good idea? When you click on an NPC, you only get a little lore description of them, and this extends to enemies too. When I click on an enemy, it doesn't tell me anything, like what its level is or whether or not I can fight it. Just something along the lines of, it's a big troll, and it probably doesn't like you. So basically, whenever I fight something in this game, I just have to hope it doesn't wreck my shit, because I have no way of knowing how strong anything is. I can never tell when I should fight or run away until either I kill the thing or it kills me. But, you know, by then, it's a little too late for that. Oh, it also does this for items too, so you have no way of knowing if a piece of armor or weapon is better than what you're using. Speaking of death, the tutorial says you lose your items when you die, but As you can probably guess from my last statement, I have died many times, but I've never lost anything. No penalty whatsoever. Maybe you have to be at a certain level in order to receive a death penalty. The only penalty I've received is having to walk through lava and a really annoying platforming segment in order to get back to the game. Which, if you ask me, is a pretty good enough death penalty. It's plenty annoying and definitely makes me want to avoid dying. So after wandering around and dying plenty, sending me all over the world just to about every place except Core North, I finally found my way to Core North. It was like finding the Imperial City in Oblivion after getting lost for an hour. Finally, I found civilization, or something like that. It's hard to describe, but it's a damn good feeling. It's a feeling like your long journey is finally over. You've reached the promised land. Also, when I arrived at Core North, I realized it was actually called Core North. I guess my mind subconsciously filled in the letter R. That's a thing our brains do when we read misspelled words. They fill in the missing pieces subconsciously. Except this time, it was spelled correctly. My brain just thought this made-up word was North spelled wrong. When selecting my hometown, it actually gave me the rundown of each one. So I never had to ask any NPCs anything in the first place. Neat. I chose Barlog. Meridian actually sounded the best, but the game said NPCs would treat me differently, depending on what hometown I chose. And according to the game, absolutely no one thought highly of people from Meridian, so I went with Barlog as the next best thing. So, after that, nothing happened. I didn't know what else to do. There were no more quests for me to do. So I found my way to Barlog, thinking that maybe that was the next thing I was supposed to do, but there was nothing waiting for me there. So I just wandered around until something killed me and called it a week. The game is seen from the first person, which actually works to the game's disadvantage because you can't see shit. And if there's an enemy too small to see, you have to back up a little in order to continue attacking it. It's very frustrating, and there's no workaround. Moving around is also frustrating as you use the W and S keys to move forward and back, but the left and right arrow keys to turn left or right. Why is it like this? I also don't know how you're supposed to progress in the game, because the game tells you when you level up, but none of my stats ever went up, so I never got any stronger from it. As I started to get the hang of things, I began to like the game, but from talking to moving to fighting, doing anything in this game feels like pulling teeth just due to how shitty the UI is. I give Meridian a 59 a 5 out of 10. I'm sure it was great for its time, but it's just far too obtuse for me to keep playing it. And I've been told Skyward Sword and Xenoblade Chronicles X, which are two of my favorite games, are both extremely obtuse. And while I don't really agree that those games are obtuse, if that's the popular opinion, it should speak for itself that Meridian 59 is far too obtuse, even for me. 1996 is finally over, and we make our way to 1997 with Ultima Online. This is the game that coined the phrase MMORPG, which is the reason a lot of people consider it the first MMO. But again, as we've seen earlier in this video, it is not. No, not even close. It was the first to use the genre's name, sure, but it hardly was the first of its kind. During the game's beta, the creator of the game and man who coined the phrase MMORPG was killed in-game by another player. He was quite literally beaten at his own game. This might not sound very impressive, but his character was previously thought to be invincible. It was just that Mr. Creator forgot to turn on his invincibility that day, and this player seized the opportunity to make history. He then proceeded to kill anyone who witnessed the assassination. That's in air quotes, by the way. Many consider this moment to be the most memorable event in the genre's history, which is why I even bothered to mention it. But it is pretty impressive nonetheless. This dude basically in-universe murdered God and killed every witness. What a legend 27. As for the game itself, it's still up and running, as you can probably guess from my footage running in the background. There are 3 races to choose from: human, elf, and gargoyle. I went with gargoyle because just look at my character. They look so cool. They can also fly, which pretty much gives them a free mount right at the start of the game. I don't know why anyone wouldn't pick gargoyle. They're just the objectively best race. And the other 2 races look lame as hell. And what other game lets you get a gargoyle? Not that I can list. Those things are usually enemies, if anything. As for classes, there are a number to choose from, but these are more like presets than cut and dry classes, a starting point, if you will. You can freely choose your starting stats and skill set regardless of what class you pick. Like I said, it's more of a suggestion or starting point. Either way, I went with Mage because it had wrestling as one of its default skills. I did alter my stats, though, to maximize intelligence while minimizing dexterity. I would later learn that this was a mistake. The controls are very simple. You can use the arrow keys or click and drag with the mouse to move. Attacking is as simple as clicking on your enemy and selecting a spell or attack. The problem I had with the game is that while the controls are easy enough to figure out, there's no tutorial, just throws you in the game and expects you to know what you're doing. I didn't know what I was doing. Eventually I came across a quest giver which sent me straight into a dungeon, so I went into the dungeon and was killed by the first enemy I encountered. Well, I guess that means it's time to grind. Remember when I said picking mage was a mistake? This is when I realized that. As I went around killing everything with a pulse, I received a most dreadful message. You do not have enough regents to cast this spell. So I checked my spell and yes, in addition to the mana cost, every spell also required specific ingredients to be present in your bag in order to cast them. The spell also had a chance to fizzle, which meant nothing happens, and you just gave your enemy a free hit. But wait, there's more. It still consumes your regens anyway, and more often than not, the spell fizzles. Listen, I played RuneScape, so having magic be fueled by items is one thing, albeit a very annoying thing, but having it cost mana too? You pick one or the other. Doing both is just bad game design. If I knew being a mage would be such a miserable experience, I would have picked a warrior. So instead I decided to put my wrestling skill to use and went around killing things by punching them. And then I figured out that there is no level up system in the game. Instead, whenever you use a skill, that skill slowly improves, and when that skill improves, you gain stats. So my plan to level up without wasting my regions was foiled, because the only way to improve my magic was to use my magic. The game starts you off with 1,000 gold. I spent the entirety of it on regions, and I went to work, keeping an eye on my regions so I still had enough to actually do the dungeon I was grinding up for. While grinding, I accidentally tamed a rabbit that I had every intention of blasting off the face of a planet, and suddenly, it was like I had found my calling. I finally had something to love about this game. And then a monster killed my rabbit, and I got sad. But I had found something I liked about the game, so I went around taming as many critters as I could, which was 5. The limit was 5. So since I couldn't do that anymore, it was back to grinding for me. So after grinding away all my regions, save for the ones I needed for the actual run, it was time to take on the dungeon. And the first enemy still killed me. Well, that was the end of that. I didn't have any more gold to buy more regions, and I couldn't find an NPC who would buy the countless amounts of robes I had from dying. So I had no choice but to retire and become a full-time animal tamer. Plus, after the dog I had tamed was tragically killed, my heart couldn't bear to go through that again. So I was fine with ditching combat permanently. I probably shouldn't have named him after my actual dog. Losing him is my worst nightmare. He's the love of my life. I think this is the first game I've ever played where I actually preferred to take the non-combat route. The only thing is, like I said, you can only tame 5 animals at a time, and I couldn't figure out what to do with them. If anyone out there could tell me how to go about playing the game exclusively through animal taming, you just let me know. It would be cool if I could set up a business around it or something. I give Ultima Online a 4 out of 10. I feel like this is a game I could really like if I actually knew how to go about it, but right now it just feels like a more frustrating version of RuneScape. And speaking of RuneScape, I know there are people in that game that just devote all their time to non-combat activities like fishing and cooking, so if any of you know how to do that in this game with animal taming, let me know, because I really do like that part of the game. I just don't know how to make the whole game about it. Like I said, I feel like this is a game I could like if I actually knew what to do with it. And unfortunately, this game was not about the best healing summon in Final Fantasy XII Revan Wings. And finally, as our last stop today, we fast forward all the way to 2002. Our final destination and last game we'll be covering today is Ragnarok Online, which is not only available to play, it's easily accessed on Steam. So all you degenerates out there that never play a game unless it's on Steam can play it too. And now it's not the Norse apocalypse or a powerful boss / spell in Final Fantasy game. It's somewhat poetic that both the first and last games I was able to play throughout this video are both Korean. In a way, we end where we began. If, you don't count Phase 4 and everything in between, but I digress. Actually, I really liked Ragnarok. I know after I didn't care much for any of the games we covered today, it feels crazy that we actually found one I liked. Gameplay in Ragnarok is simple enough. All you gotta do is click on an enemy to end their sorry existence and click where you want to walk. In fact, the entire game is played with the mouse, no keyboard required. Literally the most simple control scheme in the universe. When starting the game, you have a choice of 2 races. Human, which can be any class in the game except for one, and Doram, which can only be Summoner, and as you probably guessed, Summoner is the only class humans can't be. I went with Doram because, 1, they're adorable cat people, and 2, Summoner sounded way cooler than anything human could be. The Doram starting area music is the cutest piece of music I've ever heard. I made sure to go back there in order to take the background footage so I could show it to you. I'll be quiet for a second so you can get a good listen. Speaking of cute, the enemies in this game are also adorable. Bringing myself to kill them is one of the hardest things I had to do. I just feel sorry for them. Maybe you shouldn't make the wolves in your game look like regular house dogs. I feel like a monster. Am I the villain in this game? Probably the biggest criticism I have of this game is that fighting the enemies hurts my soul. I want to protect them, not kill them. Anyway, the game kinda comes to a screeching halt after the tutorial, as it expects you to track down this place called the Eden Group, and do their various grinding fetch quests ad infinitum, until max level without telling you. I mean, it's not hard to find, I found it, but it just kinda felt underwhelming that the tutorial sets you up to go on this grand adventure, but then just hits you with the begin the eternal grind, which I am actually fine with. The criticism I have with it is that it just felt lame to go from actual quests to fetch quests immediately. I actually, believe it or not, enjoy the grinding in this game. This is probably the only game where I could just grind without having any sort of objective or endgame to work towards, which is good because that appears to be what's actually happening. I know I said fighting enemies in this game tears me up inside, but I just like smacking things with my giant feather, man. There's a skill tree in the game, and you gain stat points to allocate however you wish to as you level up. For summoners, there are 3 paths to go down: seafood, which is healing, vegetable, which is magic, and animal, which is physical. I ultimately decided to go with a physical attack build for 2 reasons: because I like smacking things with my feather, and because being an animal summoner sounds way cooler than being a vegetable summoner or seafood summoner. But I have a plan. Putting 1 stat point into the vegetable spec gives you a spell with a base power of 700, while 1 point in the animal spec gives you a skill with a base power of 200, and you have to put 5 skill points into it in order to upgrade it to 700. It is recommended for physical attackers to have around 40 intelligence in order to boost your mana, because physical attack skills also cost mana, not just magic. So I put 40 points into intelligence ASAP, and put 1 skill point into the vegetable skill tree in order to be able to do massive damage early game. And when my strength stat surpasses 40, I'll switch to physical attack full time. It's brilliant. Magic is very strong early on because it gives you a higher power attack immediately, but then it just kind of plateaus there, whereas physical attacks just keep getting better past that point. So I basically found a way to game the system by playing mage early game and then switching to physical attacker late game. I'm a genius, a goddamn genius, and I did the math too. You can get everything from a spec skill tree and still have extra points to put in other trees at max level. It's perfect. Now the only question left is whether or not I want to put those remaining extra points into healing or become a physical / magic hybrid build. I give Ragnarok Online a 7 out of 10. It is definitely my favorite of the games we covered today, and the only one that I legitimately like beyond educational purposes. I will continue to play this one. The character creator kinda sucks though, very minimal options. Oh, but don't play in full screen mode. I found out the hard way that full screen mode crashes the game. Why it's an option is beyond me. Just put the resolution high enough in window mode that it's practically full screen. The only downside to this is that it actually splits up the login screen into square tiles for some reason, but the rest of the game is fine. But that's not the end of our story. Those are just the only games that interested me. Ragnarok, despite being the Norse apocalypse, is far from the last MMO to release before the usurper king World of Warcraft came into power. It is 7 a.m. and I have been working on this since 10 p.m. But we are almost done. You ready for a lightning round? right, it's time for the grand finale. So, Ragnarok Online, like I said earlier, is not the last game, the last MMO to come out before the Doom Lord World of Warcraft came out. But that's not to say I covered every game before Ragnarok. Like I said, I only covered the ones that interested me. There's a lot here that I did not go over. And I mean, if you want, I can make a video reading it to you. I mean, you could just read it yourself, but I don't know. My friends like it when I read them stuff. Anyway, I'm just trying to, as you can see from the time at the bottom left of the screen, I started this at 10 p.m. and I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just gonna go until we reach, here we have, the end of Ragnarok. We have Ragnarok, so I'm gonna go to this part that I highlighted all the way down to World of Warcraft, and then we're done. Because if I read this whole thing, we would be here forever. And I am losing both my voice and my sanity, so let's just bang this out really quick. This is the lightning round, so this is no research. I'm just reading off the Wikipedia page. Anyway, let's get this over with. In September 2002, Earth and Beyond was released. Having been developed since 1997, this was the second 3D sci-fi spaceship-based MMORPG. Earth and Beyond only lasted 2 years before being shut down by developer Westwood Studios owners Electronic Arts. OEA. In November 2002, Final Fantasy XI by Square Enix became the first MMOG to provide clients for different platforms using a single set of servers, in addition to being the first true MMOG to appear on a video game console due to its initial release in Japan. In May of the same year, on the PlayStation 2, it would go on to provide a client for a third platform, the Xbox 360, in 2006. In March 2003, so that's actually pretty interesting. I thought Phantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast was the first console MMO, but I guess it was Final Fantasy XI. In March 2003, Ubisoft launched the first MMORPG, Shadowbane. Shadowbane was noticeable for featuring no quests and instead relying on player warfare to provide immersion. To support this goal, it featured player-built, player-owned, and player-raised cities, that sounds cool, and capitals, and a system for player government. Also in March 2003, Sony Online Entertainment launched EverQuest Online Adventures, a PlayStation 2 spin-off of the successful EverQuest MMO. The game was only accessible to PlayStation 2 players. The game shut down on the March 29, 2012, after 9 years of full operations. I thought that was a single-player spin-off game. I didn't know it was an MMO in and of itself. That's interesting. May 2003 saw the release of EVE Online, produced by CCP Games, which had players taking the role of spaceship pilots and gameplay similar to the series Star Control. Though not the first space MMO, Microsoft Allegiance was the first space MMO and was released in 1999. EVE was able to achieve a lasting success. One of the reasons for its success may have been the game's design, which all subscribers play in one shared universe as a result of the natural partitioning of the game universe into solar systems connected by stargates. is partitioning allows the world to be divided in a way that one or more solar systems run on different servers, while still maintaining a single coherent world. I played EVE with my friends once. We basically spent an hour trying to find each other, and once we did find each other, we didn't know what to do. It was like, well, what do we do now? So I attacked one of them, because what else was I gonna do? And they ganged up on me. They killed me, but I was then flagged as an outlaw. And whenever I left the safe zone, I was instantly killed by the guards, the space police, and the game was literally unplayable. I could not play it. It was impossible for me to play the game. So I don't get how EVE is so successful and well liked. You hear all these awesome stories about like guild politics and these huge like massive wars that go on and all this drama and some really exciting stuff, but when you actually play the game, it's not nearly as cool as all those articles and stories make it sound. In fact, on one of the articles I read, one of the stories on, is the top comment was like, I wish the game was actually this fun to play. I wish the game was actually like these stories. So it's not just me. In June 2003, the Walt Disney Company launched its first MMORPG, Toontown Online. Oh, we know Toontown. For open release, unlike a lot of other... I didn't know this came before World of Warcraft, though. Unlike a lot of other first and second generation MMOs at the time, Toontown was unique from the rest because it specifically focused on reaching audiences of children and families. As a kid, I never connected the dots that Toontown was Disney. I was like, hey, isn't that Mickey Mouse or isn't that Donald Duck there? I thought they were like cameos. I never connected. I was a dumb kid. While most MMOs of the generation appeal to older players because of this, it is often entitled the first MMO for families. With Toontown's unique playing style, players took the roles of classic cartoon characters, like Ice Duck, which were heavily based on the world in the 1988 Touchstone Pictures film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. By the way, Ice Duck is an actual player that I saw in Toontown when I played for like 5 minutes back in the day. The objective of the game was simple. One had to save the city of Toontown from evil business robots known as cogs. While a lot of the game was based on leveling up from side activities, the combat features of the game took precedence. The weapons of the game that lured off cogs were known as gags, unique objects found in cartoons and comedic in nature, such as a flower pot or TNT. According to the storyline, cogs just can't take a joke. I remember that from the trailer. After a good 10 years of the game being targeted to all kinds of audience, Disney decided to close it in order to shift developments towards another virtual experience known as Club Penguin, the greatest PvP MMO of all time. Thousands of community members are still actively playing in community servers that have risen in the wake of its closing. Jokes aside, tipping the iceberg on the last day of Club Penguin's servers being up actually kind of got me a little misty-eyed. I don't know, had to be there. You know, it was just a special moment. Because back in the day we were all trying to tip that iceberg, and then we actually did it, but that was it. The game was over. In October 2003, Lineage 2, NCSoft's sequel to Lineage, became the latest MMORG to achieve huge success across Asia. It received the Presidential Award at the 2003 Korean Game Awards, and now the second most popular MMORG in the world. As the first half of 2005, Lineage 2 counted over 2.25 million subscribers worldwide, with servers in Japan, China, North America, Taiwan, and Europe, once the popularity of the game had surged in the West. 2003 also saw the appearance of Second Life. While not primarily a role-playing game, but there's a lot of role-playing that goes on in there, it is clearly multiplayer and online, and used as a platform where players construct role-playing games based on gore, Star Trek, vampires, and other genres. Oh yeah, other genres indeed. In April 2004, NCSoft produced another significant title, City of Heroes, which I have covered on Game of Week. It introduces several major innovations in gameplay and also featured an extreme number of possible visual character appearances, and its comic book superhero theme made it stand out. And next we enter the new era, where right out the gate we get EverQuest 2 and World of Warcraft. And this is where our story ends. After that, it was all history. So the final MMO that was released before World of Warcraft was EverQuest 2, which came out a couple months before World of Warcraft did. In fact, one of my college professors actually worked on EverQuest 2. And when World of Warcraft came out, he brought his he brought in his computer to the office and, played World of Warcraft in the office, and everyone huddled around him. I guess it was a very, exciting time. His boss came by and said, "Is that World of Warcraft?" He says, "Yeah, I'm sorry for bringing it in." He's like, "No, it's fine. But I'm not impressed. I'm not worried. It doesn't look that good." And this was their direct competitor, and well, we all know how that ended. So yeah, the last two games before World of Warcraft dominated the genre were City of Heroes and EverQuest 2, both which are two games that I have already covered here on Game of Week. And then, we got RuneScape. We all love RuneScape. Well, we used to love RuneScape. It's even OSRS. It kind of sucks now. But yeah, that's all there is. And then the current generation of MMOs, this era is so tiny compared to everything else. But yeah, we're done. Video's over. It's time for me to write the closing paragraph. I'll see you guys there. It's very interesting to me to see where this genre originated, how it evolved over time before reaching its final form as the standard set by World of Warcraft. I honestly can't tell you why this subject fascinates me so much. It's not even my favorite genre. I care about the history of JRPGs as a whole is that the first JRPG was Underground Exploration by Koei. Not Koei Tecmo, just Koei. After that, I don't care, except aside from the history of my favorite games, Pokemon is based on the series creator's childhood hobby of bug catching, Shin Megami Tensei. and by extension Persona originated as a mediocre sci-fi novel. Xenoblade is based on a giant novel written by the series creator called Perfect Works. Donkey Kong was the first Mario game and the game that gave Nintendo its big break into the video game industry, and that's why Cranky Kong should be in Smash Bros. Ultimate. That kind of, that kind of stuff. The specifics. But as for my favorite genre as a whole, I don't really care about its history beyond what the first game was. I just like to play them, and if I care about a specific franchise enough, then I'll learn about that specific franchise's history, but that's it. Maybe it's because JRPGs are primarily console games, and console gaming really only evolves with the consoles themselves, while MMOs are primarily PC games evolve as technology itself progresses, or at least it did until World of Warcraft. And I'm sure you're sick of me saying that name for the millionth time. I know, I am too. I feel you. But it could also be that MMOs are more than just games. My first MMO was actually Neopets in 2001, which I didn't find out was considered an MMO until today. I'll forever miss you, Edwall, my Kaiko. May you rest in peace, since my account didn't survive the great server purge. But my first real, quote-unquote, real MMO I played was RuneScape, all the way back in 2004. And it felt like a real adventure, more than just a game. To this day, the feeling I felt when I first played RuneScape was an indescribable sense of adventure and wonder I've only experienced a handful of times in my life, shared only by the first time I played Pokemon, Oblivion, the Hobbit GBA game, Adventure Quest, Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings, and Dragon Quest. And of course, I have to say it, World of Warcraft. I counted 8. That there were 8 times I felt that feeling, which sounds like a lot, but I've been alive for 24 years, so it's really not a lot. Just about every show I watched as a kid had an episode where the characters played an MMO, so this concept was always hyped up to me, long before I actually played one. Kim Possible, Danny Phantom, Chobits, The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. RuneScape was my medieval Magic Quest, and I was so happy to have one. Yeah, they really are more than just games. I guess that's why when I talk about MMOs as a whole, I use the term the MMO industry rather than as a part of the video game industry. These games let you be whatever you want, whether that's a goblin magician, a space warrior, the Gen 3 male trainer, an actual ninja cat, yourself, or Brondo, local shaman and king of the barons. It can also be about the memories you make along the way. I know I have a lot of stories of days gone past from these games, and especially today in this pandemic, these games are the only way for me to get any degree of social interaction, so it can be nice to just chill out and hang with other players in the game instead of actually playing it, which is an aspect of these games I never thought I'd take part in, but it's become something I'm doing more and more lately. We joke about it, but fashion really is the end game now more than ever, in any game of this genre. Awkwardly standing around at the Minister's Waypoint in Divinity's Reach, being an e-girl in Block 7, memeing during concerts, or even just dancing for money blocks. Humans are social animals, and MMOs are extremely handy, now more than ever, to obtain that instinctual desire for human contact. Whatever the reason is, these games always have something to keep me coming back. I was a bit of an MMO junkie in high school, but I guess I actually never stopped being one. Just less of one. But I promise, my limit is 5. So I guess I'm not really an MMO junkie, just like a guy who plays more than one MMO. I'm thinking too far ahead of this. It is 8:11. But hey, if you actually made it this far, thanks for listening to me. I know this isn't that great, but I put a lot of heart into this, and it really makes me happy to know you actually cared to hear me talk your ear off for this long. So, thank you, and I'll see you later. Bye. Now, I can rest.